Andrew Stillwell, and fresh off our interview last week with the Drunk Riders, I am joined again by a full house cast of characters of the Coaster101 team. I'm going to welcome them all individually. Out in California, we've got Eric Woolley. Eric, how are you?
Hi, I'm doing well. How are you, Andrew?
I'm good. And in Ohio, currently digging himself out from a blizzard, we've got Nick Weisenberger. Nick, are you staying warm?
I'm trying to. My back hurts from shoveling.
All right. Sorry. I don't know anything about shoveling snow living in North Carolina, but I hear it's bad. So my apologies to you.
At least we can go sledding.
And coming to you live from there we go. And coming to you live from a pile of cardboard boxes in Nashville, Tennessee, in his new apartment. Not that he lives in a pile of cardboard boxes. John Stevenson. John, how's it going?
It is good, and I actually do, in fact, live in a pile of cardboard boxes right now because that's all I have. So,
John hasn't gotten a new bed delivered.
It's nice. Everything is on back order. So, in 6 to 8 months, I will have a fully furnished apartment.
I love it. Well, we'll get you there eventually, and then maybe we'll get you a Coaster101 cup or something, so you have something to drink out of in the kitchen.
Yes, that would be great.
And last but certainly not least, we have one of the most recent attendees. He got accepted into the Disney College program, Shane Joseph. Shane, how are you?
I am doing pretty good, Andrew. Thank you for asking.
You having a magical day?
I am having a magical day. Yep.
That's good. You're going to have a lot more of those come August, so we're very excited for you there.
I hope so.
Congratulations, Shane.
Thank you very much.
Very exciting.
This week on the show, we're going to talk a lot of news, and there's so much going on. And by the nature of this podcast releasing on Mondays, we're getting the biggest piece of news from last week actually dropped on Tuesday. So by the time you're listening to this podcast, it will probably be 6, 7, 8 days old, depending on when you listen. But the news came out last week that Cedar Fair was, I'm going to read the exact news brief from the investor relations site. They're reviewing an unsolicited, non-binding proposal from SeaWorld. It says Cedar Fair, yada, 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 boilerplate stuff. Today confirmed it has received an unsolicited, non-binding proposal from SeaWorld Entertainment, consistent with its fiduciary duties and consultation with its independent legal and financial advisors, yada, yada, yada. The Cedar Fair Board of Directors will carefully review and consider the proposal to determine the course of action that it believes best to be in the interest of the company and its unit holders. Cedar Fair unit holders do not need to take any action at this time. This was an offer for $3.4 billion, and that's billion with a B. I'll start somewhere. Somebody chime in. What do we think about...
So to make it very clear after you read the investor relations site, SeaWorld has made an offer to buy Cedar Fair.
Yeah, I guess I didn't say that. But yeah, SeaWorld has made an offer to buy Cedar Fair. I mean, what's our general consensus here? How do we feel about this offer? I know Cedar Fair received an offer a couple of years ago from Six Flags. I think it was for $4 billion for everything. But what do you guys think? Somebody chime in first, but what do you guys think of this offer from SeaWorld to purchase Cedar Fair?
Yeah, I mean, I think to make a little more context, so this offer from SeaWorld is $60 a share, which I think at the time of the offer was about $10 more per share than the share price was for Cedar Fair stock at the time. It's now jumped up to about the same, so probably SeaWorld will have to offer more if they actually want to make a deal here. But I think, like, I was reading things that I think there's two sort of takeaways that I have from it. One is that there's sort of I think general industry optimism about the theme park and entertainment industry, tourism industry going forward. As we know, the last couple of years have been very hard on that business. And so I think this is sort of like, okay, a sign that like expecting that industry will recover and start growing a whole bunch again like it was before the pandemic. SeaWorld trying to sort of take advantage of a time where there's a dip in prices for other parks. That you mentioned, Andrew, that Six Flags had made an offer a few years ago, I guess actually in 2019, so maybe right before the pandemic. Six Flags had offered $70 a share to Cedar Fair, and that had been turned down. So this is, I think, a little bit of maybe SeaWorld hoping to maybe try and get a good deal before things start to recover.
You got to buy the dip.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's a buy low. I think the other takeaway that I have which I hadn't thought about until reading this, is that Cedar Fair and SeaWorld parks are in almost entirely different geographic regions. SeaWorld is only in Florida, Texas, California, and then I guess Busch Gardens in Virginia. And so the only overlap is sort of, San Diego being kind of close to Orange County where Knott's Berry Farm, Cedar Fair is, and then King's Dominion and Busch Gardens. But other than that, SeaWorld has no presence anywhere else. And so if SeaWorld is looking to expand a pass holder base or something like that, the way that we all get Cedar Fair Platinum passes, because we know that we'll then travel to different Cedar Fair parks around the country. I wouldn't get a SeaWorld pass because I'm not going to go to multiple of I'm not going to Florida and Texas usually in the same year from Northern California. But if it was lumped in with my Californians Great America pass, now it's oh, okay. Now I would make it much more likely that I take a trip to Texas to go to SeaWorld San Antonio or something.
Mm-hmm. And you've got Sesame Place and Dorney that are also kind of in that same geographic region. I know those are different target markets, really. It's Sesame Place more targeted towards children and families, where Dorney is kind of that more traditional amusement park. But, Nick, John, Shane, what do you guys think? Would you want to see SeaWorld take over Cedar Fair, the companies merge? What do you see out of this potential?
When I first saw this, I think coming from a marketing background and branding and advertising, I think that was the part, and I know this is thinking way too far ahead, but just how do they handle that? With when Cedar Fair bought Paramount, you had this kind of slow transformation of those parks into Cedar Fair properties, obviously dropping the Paramount name. And so in this case, what is the path forward for them? Because to me, Busch Gardens, SeaWorld parks are in a different league than Cedar Fair parks, even though, they're both, Cedar Fair parks Cedar Fair has nice parks, but they're still in my eyes, totally different leagues. And so if this goes through, does SeaWorld continue operating them just almost as completely separate entities, with the Snoopy property and the Sesame Street, or do they start to mix the two? Does Cedar Point become SeaWorld, Cedar Point, or Busch Gardens, Cedar? Obviously, I don't think that's going to happen. But that's kind of the not so much the business side of things. I'm thinking of more the branding and the public side. And I was just reading some reactions on social media, and one thing that I hadn't even really crossed my mind was some people saying, I don't want them to do this because I don't support SeaWorld. I don't support, because of the lingering blackfish reaction. So there's just so many things that are at play here, I think, from a public relations standpoint and a branding standpoint, that it'll be really interesting to see if this does go through, how they plan to kind of handle bringing in this new family of parks that, you have parks like Michigan's Adventure. How is that going to fit into the SeaWorld portfolio? So those are my 2 cents and then some.
I do think it is ironic that here in Ohio, we used to have a SeaWorld Ohio, which opened in 1970 and then closed in 2000. Of course, everyone knows the story. It was bought by Six Flags, was then bought by Cedar Fair, and then demolished after that. So the fact that you could now have Kings Island and Cedar Point being owned by SeaWorld is funny. If you went back in time to 1999 and told someone that SeaWorld Ohio wouldn't exist, but these two other parks would be owned by SeaWorld, no one would have believed you.
They're playing the long game. I think that's why I read that on Twitter somewhere. It's the SeaWorld 22 years after the fact is just officially playing the long game. But I think, John, kind of going back to what you said, this rebranding, and I saw it on, again, social media. It was calling it Cedar Fair, SEASDAR. And I think it was our buddy Justin, it's CP Food Blog on Twitter. He put on Twitter soon, and he just had the Worlds of Fun sign, and he crudely wrote the word C over at SEA, so it was just C Worlds of Fun, and it was. I thought that was pretty clever.
Or Cedar Point with SEA instead of CE.
I like it. Let's do it. Shane, what do you think?
I mean, I think it's interesting to think about. Do I think it'll ever happen? Probably not. It's interesting that it's SeaWorld offering to buy Cedar Fair. If you were to told me about this, I would have thought it was the other way around, just because Cedar Fair seems to be the larger chain, or at least have larger parks. But you have SeaWorld, who just put in a brand new attraction at every single one of their parks over the past couple of years. So maybe they are doing well enough to actually have this offer go through and buy Cedar Fair. And if that does happen, I'd be curious to see kind of what you were saying before with how they manage the parks. Do they manage them as a SeaWorld / Busch Gardens park, or do they stay as Cedar Fair? And then how does that work with the rides? Are the previous SeaWorld parks being prioritized for rides, or the opposite because they want to put rides in new parks? So to think about that part of it is the most interesting thing to me, even though it's doubtful to me that this would happen. It's an interesting hypothetical, at least.
Yeah, I think, Eric, as we were kind of talking before the show started, he said something, #business. And that's why it wasn't going to happen.
I mean, I think that, so like obviously, like at this $3.4 billion offer, that doesn't seem like it's going to happen, right? That seemed too low when I read it. I think I read an article on maybe CNBC or something where some expert was speculating that SeaWorld could maybe go up to $70 or $80 a share, which would maybe be enough to do it. I mean, $80 a share would be a pretty good premium over the current stock price. SeaWorld is a larger company from a market cap point of view. I think they're worth about $4.5 billion. And I don't know how much of that, like, I think it's one of those things where like SeaWorld is a tier below Universal and Disney, but I think that one of the SeaWorld parks, I forget which one, is maybe like the only other theme park, like the non-Disney, non-Universal theme park that cracks the top. And so it seems like they're sort of maybe just because they're in Orlando, they've got sort of a bigger market presence from that point of view. Yeah, I don't. So I think I'm like a skeptical that this will happen unless they pony up a lot more money, and whether they'll decide to do it or not. I think as somebody who lives near Cedar Fair parks, I would, compared to like the Six Flags offer a couple of years ago, this is much less would be like, oh, this could be a good thing for Cedar Fair parks instead of a bad thing. I think, like Six Flags parks are usually less nice than Cedar Fair parks. If you track the investment these parks have made, like Six Flags seems to make the least investment in the parks, Cedar Fair in the middle, and SeaWorld maybe the most based on the last few years. But yeah, I mean, I think a good question, Shane, of like, okay, if they buy this, like, how do they spread? Do they like keep investing in every park, or how do they spread out where they're putting rides and stuff? And maybe it's that they like de-emphasize some of the roller coaster stuff in the SeaWorld parks, because now they'll have a bunch of roller coaster specific parks that they can focus on.
Yeah. And I know, in the past couple of years, John, I know you brought up the kind of the Blackfish backlash, which is a fun thing to say. But I know in recent past, like, SeaWorld they've started kind of removing the animal shows and changing the shows as to less, animals performing and more like educating about dolphins and orcas and seals and things like that. And I know they've also really been, getting a lot of good press and focused heavily on their conservation efforts. So I think, the Blackfish argument, it's one of those things that obviously existed. I don't even know if it's still on Netflix anymore. So I think
it's a very tired argument, but it is still one that people love to bring up. So I honestly had kind of forgotten about it until I was reading some of the comments, and obviously the comment section is not where you go for the general consensus of a story, but that is, I think that's something that they'll have to, Cedar Point fans like, well, does that mean Shamu is coming to Cedar Point? So I think those are just the questions that just the general public might ask, not necessarily in a bad way, but again, it goes to that perception, the branding of it. And I think this will be, if this does go through, which I'm very skeptical as well, I think it'll be a pretty big public relations challenge to kind of set expectations, because when you read that headline, SeaWorld offering to buy Cedar Fair, what does that mean for Dorney Park? What does that mean for my home park? And is this going to be? Are they going to get the same investment that the SeaWorld parks and Busch parks have had? So I'm most interested in it from that standpoint. Again, this was not on my 2022 bingo card, as I'm sure it was not for a lot of others. But it'll be interesting if for some reason it does pan out. It'll be interesting to see. I think it'll end up being a good case study for how to handle such a large purchase.
Yeah, for sure. And
acquisition.
I would, business wise, I don't know if it'll happen. I do know that it made more headlines locally. Obviously, one of my local parks and local markets is a Cedar Fair park at Carowinds, and it definitely made the local news cycle last week, where it was like, SeaWorld wants to buy the parent company of Carowinds. And I mean, I'm sure that has little something to do with the fact that, Cedar Fair has their second corporate office down here. But I don't remember that happening as much back in 19 with the Six Flags bid. So, there is a little bit more, I don't want to say smoke to the fire with this one, but I am interested to kind of see what happens and how it plays out. I think there are things that Cedar Fair does better than the Busch Gardens SeaWorld parks. I think there are things kind of on the reverse that SeaWorld Busch Gardens parks do better than Cedar Fair. So it's going to be a very interesting time. And like Eric said, #business, they need to pony up more money if it's actually going to happen. So whatever Eric said, he went to Stanford, I didn't. But on the subject of SeaWorld Investments, we need to talk a little bit about Shane's big trip this week. Shane is actually headed down to Tampa. He will be at the media day for Iron Gwazi. I know some employees and associates and team members, or whatever the vernacular is down there in Tampa, have started to ride Iron Gwazi at Busch Gardens Tampa, and it's coming away with rave reviews. Shane, what are you most excited for about this trip?
Well, I think I'm most excited to experience a hyper version of an RMC coaster, because the biggest RMC that I've ridden as of now is Twisted Colossus at Six Flags Magic Mountain, which is not a hyper, if I'm remembering correctly. So I think the sort of combination of those two things is something that I really don't have any frame of reference for. I think that a lot of times when a new coaster is opening, we can look at it and kind of speculate based on other coasters we've ridden what things might feel like or what the ride will be like. And I just don't have that for this. So I'm most excited to experience these elements at the speed, first of all, that they're going to be experiencing, because this ride has no mid-course brake run, which the other RMC hyper in the US, which is Steel Vengeance, does have a mid-course brake run. So the pacing throughout this ride is just completely fast the whole way, which I think I'm really going to like. There's some elements on here that I think are pretty innovative for RMC that I'm excited to review and kind of tell if those are going to be the sort of things that RMC is going for in the future, because this is a different coaster for them. They haven't done something quite like this before. So I'm very excited to see if this is going to lay the groundwork for where RMC goes next with their rides.
Yeah. And Nick, Eric, and John, I know you guys have all ridden Steel Vengeance. We were there the same day, and I didn't get to ride it, unfortunately. And I've heard kind of this described as a smaller, more compact Steel Vengeance, just nonstop element after element. Are you jonesing to get down to Tampa and ride it yourselves? I know, we kind of sent Shane as the guinea pig, but are you guys planning your Tampa trips yet?
Yeah, I'm definitely trying to get down there this summer. Also would love to tie in Universal trip to ride a Velocicoaster. But yeah, especially after Steel Vengeance. I mean, I think RMC, at every RMC that I've ridden almost has wowed me to some extent. And so this one I'm sure will be, will be like the others. But I also haven't ridden Cheetah Hunt. So that's another that I'm really excited to ride. So yes, definitely Busch Gardens Tampa is on my bucket list for this summer.
Yeah, I haven't been to Busch Gardens Tampa in a very long time. I think it was 2008 was the only time I've been there. And some sort of Florida trip it's somewhere on my to-do list at some point, mostly because there are lots of things that have opened since I was last in Florida, which was maybe in fall 2019 or something, and only went to Disney on that trip. So someday I'll have to add a week-long trip to Florida to my calendar to do all of those. I think I will be very curious to hear from Shane. I think my complaint about RMC rides in general is that I think they kind of all start to blend together with me. As I ride more, they're sort of oh, these are the elements are cool, but the way they seem to run tends to be sort of feel very samey to me. So every time they make a new one, I'm sort of oh, is this will there be something cool and different with this one? So I'll be curious to hear, Shane, your comparison, even to something like Twisted Colossus and others that you've been on, or yours, John, when you get down there, to see how it compares to something like Steel Vengeance, if they're doing anything kind of new with it.
Yeah. And I do want to say, some of the reviews I've seen, again, everybody loves the ride. I have seen, and I don't know if this is an RMC wide problem. It was the reason I wasn't able to ride Steel Vengeance back in 2017, 2018, whenever that was, when we went out there. But I've heard that the restraints and the trains are notoriously difficult for people of larger size. And I'm not talking just, heavier people, but I've heard some taller people as well have had some issues getting into the train. And I want to ask you guys, and again, you guys are all, I would say, average sized individuals. You don't have any issues getting into trains, but do you think that RMC is kind of missing out by limiting their size, size requirements and size allowances to a kind of a smaller coaster fan and coaster enthusiast? I mean, I think that's the easiest way. You guys are kind of laughing at me, and I'm asking this as the resident fat guy of the group.
Well, guys, coaster fans on average are too big to ride RMCs. I do think it's funny. They have had, I feel have had issues with. Even somebody who I am not very large, but there are times that it has to be a very tight fit to get it to check and stuff like that. And I know always this is particularly noticeable on Twisted Colossus because it's why it never races, is that they have to go through and shove down on a few people that clearly are riding other things at Magic Mountain without having a problem. And so it's sort of and I have read things that it's a safety issue because of all the airtime and it has to be very tight on you so you don't go flying out of the seat or something. But I do sort of always wonder it's been this way for however many years. They've been, 6-7 years plus. It's I'm surprised they haven't made some effort to re-engineer how those restraints latch or the points, hydraulics, how they lock, or how it redesigned in some way that it can
well, a lot of their
be
rides
secure for a bigger person.
a lot of their rides are retrofits where they're redoing existing wood coasters. So the gauge of the track is already set. So it's not they could make the vehicles much wider in order to make the restraints wider. But the number one thing is safety, and their rides are really dynamic. So you've got to have some pretty beefy restraints to hold people in safely for how how extreme the forces are on those rides.
Yeah, if the other option is an over the shoulder restraint, maybe this is better.
Yeah. It's ironic that they have to have beefy restraints, but the beefy people can't ride. Oh boy. Well, Shane, I am jealous of your trip down to Tampa. I know you're going to have a good time, and we'll have you back on the podcast. Not next week, but the week after. We got a very special guest next week, supposedly, and I don't want to ruin too much with that, but we'll have you back on the podcast. You can tell us all about your trip to Tampa and Iron Gwazi and Cheetah Hunt and going out to the Hard Rock Casino or whatever else it is you're going to do on your trip down in Tampa. So that'll be fun.
Yeah, it should be. Make sure to follow the social media this week too, because I'm going to be posting a ton of like live videos and different pictures of the ride. And I think we actually get a video of us on the ride, which would be great. So I'll post that as soon as we get our hands on that too.
Are we going to get some TikToks, Shane?
You know what? I think we're going to get some TikToks from this trip. I really do.
Oh, yeah.
I think,
yes.
What is it, our second?
All right, everyone, hold him to that.
Yes, please do. Somebody text me the day of, and I'll do it. I'll make a TikTok.
You trust me, I'll do that.
Thank you.
I will hassle you. I'll send you the password, whatever you need. We'll make it happen.
I'll do it.
Yeah. And another piece of news that kind of dropped in the past week, very important coaster news, I feel like, up at La Ronde. They had a project that was announced as new for 2020. Use new in air quotes. Relocated for 2020. Green Lantern flight, whatever. The Intamin Zaxby's from Six Flags Magic Mountain came down in California. Was going to be rebuilt in Eastern Canada. That was supposed to be a new for 2020 project, and COVID being what it was, there were not a whole lot of new for 2020 rides. So they pushed it to 2021, and then it got pushed to 2022, and now it's over. And let me just have a resounding answer from the panel. The fact that Vipere, as Google Translate tells me this word is pronounced, is canceled, does it mean anything to you? No. Okay.
No.
It maybe makes me more likely to go to La Ronde.
Yeah, that's true.
I mean, hopefully La Ronde gets something else instead, like at some point in the next few years.
I think
Eric,
my worry with it right now is that it's going to end up at Six Flags New England because they just cleared out their giant inverted boomerang. It's literally like in pieces. Right? And that is a spot that would fit a Zax spin. And I know that Six Flags New England does already have a free spin, but we just got rid of our second boomerang in the park. We also have 2 swinging Frisbee rides. So if they're going for some sort of record with that, then it could end up here. So that's the only thing I'm a little worried about, is that it's going to appear again at some other park. But who knows? Maybe they're just giving up on it.
Would you say it being added there would be deja vu for the park, Shane?
Yes, I would.
Eric, thank you for shaking your head. I appreciate that.
You can, Shane, you could ride the Zax spin, the free spin back to back with each other.
Yeah,
and then read our article about why free spins don't suck and Zax spins do.
Yeah, that would.
I think Nick wrote.
Yeah.
But
Eric, did you ever ride it out in California?
Oh yeah, multiple times. Many times. Maybe not many times.
Several times.
I was actually like, I never had like an agonizingly painful experience on it, but it was also like not fun. It's one of those, like I don't know, it's one of those things that people who go and try and get every credit, like I get why they do it and it's not going to kill them, but it's the same reason I don't ride like Vekoma SLCs. Is like, this isn't like I can ride this, it didn't kill me, but I don't know why I would try to experience that again.
So that seemed to be the number one complaint then. It was a painful ride.
Yeah, I think that was generally the main complaint with it.
I think
you
Defunctland
get the occasional whiplash.
I think Defunctland already has a video up on this ride.
They do. I remember watching it at some point. Yes, there's a Defunctland video about it.
Do they have it as Green Lantern or Vipere or?
I think it was when Green Lantern was removed.
I think it says something about like the worst Six Flags coaster is the title.
Yeah. Yep, that sounds right.
So do we get like an in memoriam for Vipere, or like like 20, I guess announced 2019 and never opened. I mean, this is like,
yeah. How does that show up on RCDB? Is it does it get listed as ever having moved if it was just like shipped and the pieces sat there?
I think they do have an option for relocated. I've seen some things there before. And I know this happened at with the coasters from Hard Rock Park, actually. 2 of them were shipped to that park in Vietnam, and one of those was Maximum RPM, the premier Ferris wheel coaster. And it got built. It got all the way to Vietnam. It got built and erected and never opened. And I don't believe it may have even been disassembled at this point. I don't know. So we'll, we're going to have to leave that to Dwayne and the good folks at RCDB to let us know what we can refer to Laurent's Vipere as. Let's see, not to wrap up here, but Nick, I know you've got a trip coming up to Universal Orlando at the end of the month.
Yep, 10 days from today.
Oh my gosh. What are you most excited for that? And don't say Velocicoaster, because we know that's the answer.
Pretty much everything. So it's been 10 years since my wife and I have been there, and we're taking our 2 kids, and that'll be their first time going there. So we're staying at Cabana Bay. We have 4-day tickets, so hopefully going to check out everything. I was making a list of all the attractions, and there are so many new things there, like even going back to Transformers at Universal Studios. And yeah, I'm really looking forward to it, especially I've seen how the kids react, because my son's a big Harry Potter fan. So that was one of the things that when the pandemic started, my wife started reading him the illustrated edition of the stories. So really looking forward to that.
Do you think your kids will let you leave Harry Potter Land to go to any other part of Universal?
I'm going to make them. We're all just like, okay, you guys can stay here. I'll go ride Velocicoaster.
Yeah.
You guys go to the Ball Factory of the Curious George Land and Fievel's Playland. If anybody doesn't know what Fievel is, I mean, that's
I was quizzing my kids all the characters, and they know none of them.
That's good.
They can name almost every Disney character, but they know nothing outside of Minions. They say Universal.
Oh, they're not big Popeye fans, or what?
No, I showed my daughter a Popeye short on YouTube, and she's like, "What is it?"
No, Dudley Do-Right's not kicking around anymore.
Well,
I was asking my wife, what movies can we show them beforehand? Jurassic Park, Men in Black.
I still love the line from Men in Black. Is Will Smith's I'm NYPD, which means I'll knock your punk ass down. Such a good line at the beginning of that movie. But Nick, we'll have you back on the podcast as well to kind of talk about your family vacation, Universal Orlando. For past listeners to the podcast, maybe we'll even have Nick's kids back, and with any luck, they won't hit him in the face with a pair of headphones this time. So yeah, that'll be good.
We'll have to get them in the middle of the day, not at the end of the day.
All right. Well, I think we'll make that happen.
We'll time it better, and maybe we'll call in some reinforcements.
I love it. John, you got any big trips coming up before we wrap this show up?
Yeah, hoping to go to Dollywood for opening day, which is in just a little over a month on March 12th. So looking forward to seeing, I don't know, big changes at the park this year, but there's always some interesting things that have gone on during the off season. So hopefully Lightning Rod will be ready and waiting for us and open.
Okay. I love it. Yeah. Well, I am that same weekend. I know it's Carowinds opening weekend is that weekend, but I'm going to be out in Vegas actually. So I'm hoping I can just do a massive credit run in Vegas and go to New York, and ride whatever the roller coaster there is calling itself these days. If it's Manhattan Express or Big Apple Coaster, roller coaster, or whatever the heck it is, I'm excited to pay the $20 to ride that. Going to go over to Circus to the Adventure Dome, try to ride the El Loco and the Canyon Blaster. And according to RCDB, there is something called Las Vegas Mini Grand Prix. They've got a Dragon Wagon, and if I'm really hard up for entertainment, I might have to take an Uber over there at the north end of the strip. So That's going to be fun. I'm very excited to get out there. As all of you laugh at me for riding the kiddie
Vegas
coaster.
has really screwed up. If the most entertaining thing you can find to do is take an Uber to go ride a dragon wagon.
I mean, that's not all I'm doing. I'm getting in. I'm there for a bachelor party, getting in a little bit early, and I figure if I'm in.
It's the race to 300 credits, right?
It really is.
You're trying to beat Kyle.
I'm trying to beat Kyle. I won't beat Kyle. Might not beat John. So it's John. Where are you right now? We're right around the same. All of us are kind of right around the same. So
I
think I'm 245.
Let me get my spreadsheet up right here.
Okay.
I am at. Let's see. Gosh, the list is so long. I have to scroll down.
Content.
when
Andrew, when you're, as John mumbles, when you're back, I don't really remember. Like, I've ridden Manhattan Express multiple times, but we should talk about your experience, because I don't really remember. I don't remember hating it as much as the rest of the world seems to.
It's got those new Premier Rides trains, which I think are similar to the trains on Icebreaker or the Skyrocket trains. So I think it'll be an enjoyable ride from a train standpoint. I think a lot of people they didn't like the Togo trains or the Togo restraints. And if they were anything like the stand-up coaster at King's Dominion, that was like the weird, like, vest restraint that kind of came in over your chest. It wasn't over it was over the shoulder, but it wasn't over the head. It was really
came in from the
really
sides.
odd. Yeah, it came in from the sides. So I think these new trains, everything I've seen on social media as far as reviews and things of that nature go, I think it's going to be a fun time. So, John, did you get a number?
256.
Okay. So I think you and I are right around the same. And
Mm-hmm.
yeah, the race to 300 is on among the Coaster101 team. And I know Kyle went to like 75 parks last year, and he made up some serious ground, and we're all trailing him now. But we're going to have to do a podcast on coaster credits and coaster counting, and how Eric thinks it's stupid, and how Shane's like, I only have 60 credits.
Hey, I'm at like 130. So
okay, fine. All right. Well, I tell you what, that's going to do it for this week's episode of the Coaster101 podcast. Eric, Nick, John, Shane, thanks you guys for hopping on with me and talking all the latest and greatest news of the roller coaster and theme park industry. Be sure to follow us on social media. Like Shane said, we're at Coaster101 everywhere you can consume social media: Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, YouTube. Shane promised TikToks.
I promise.
TikTok, we're on Coaster101, so make it so all we don't do on TikTok is comment on the Coaster Cuzzies guys' TikToks, because that's all really I do on that platform. I also have a website, Coaster101.com, late breaking news, stories, reviews, articles, interviews, all sorts of good stuff there. So if you're listening to this podcast for the first time and you just happened upon it without really knowing what Coaster101 is, Coaster101.com, there's 17 years worth of articles for you to go check out there, and they cover pretty much any topic you can think of. If you're listening to this podcast, please like, rate, review, subscribe, tell your friends. You can rate on iTunes or Spotify now, so we love 5-star reviews. We love nice comments, things like that. Somebody called me dreamy, which was really odd, but it is what it is. I know who that person was, and I think they're just like, having a little fun. It's all good. But yeah, 5-star reviews and nice reviews and comments and things like that. 5-star ratings, I think, is what I was actually trying to say. Whatever. It's been a long week. Thanks, as always, to Justin Mabry for our theme music, and we'll talk to y'all again soon.